Tonight, abortion ban struck down. Kansas voters reject a proposed amendment to allow lawmakers to place restrictions on abortions.
Our legislature has little to no ability to place even the most basic regulation.
Plus, the primary results too close to call in Arizona. And a pro-life Trump-backed candidate wins in Michigan. And the few, the proud, and the faithful.
Throughout boot camp, reading my Bible and praying, it seemed to help me a lot.
Meet the Marines whose Christian faith helps them stay the course. All this and more on Faith Nation.
Kansas voters deliver a blow to pro-life advocates in the battle over abortion. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Matt Gelka.
In Washington, I'm Abigail Robertson. The first in the nation ballot test for abortion since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade ends in a setback for the pro-life push in Kansas.
Voters in the majority-red state rejecting a proposed amendment declaring the state constitution does not grant the right to an abortion, a right the Kansas Supreme Court codified into law back in 2019, and a move many disagree with.
This Kansas Supreme Court has determined that there's a right to an abortion in the Kansas Constitution, and it's not there.
We haven't been able to pass a pro-life law in Kansas since 2018 because of what our Supreme Court did. Our legislature has little to no ability to place even the most basic regulations.
While most opposed to abortion look ahead at what's next in the fight for life, pro-choice advocates are celebrating the Tuesday result.
It's a huge victory for Kansas, for women, for reproductive rights in America. The overwhelming no vote just proves that people in states can stand up and say, no, you're not going to control my body. And I hope this is an example for other states.
And with nearly all votes counted, 59% of Kansas voters rejected the proposed constitutional amendment to limit abortion.
Meanwhile, here in the nation's capital, President Biden signed an executive order today aimed at providing protections for women who have to travel across state lines to access an abortion.
You know, this executive order also helps women travel out of state for medical care. Secretary Becerra is going to work with states through the Medicaid to allow them to provide reproductive health care for women who live in states where abortions are being banned.
The White House says as part of the order, states that haven't banned abortion will be able to seek Medicaid waivers that would help treat women seeking out-of-state abortions. It also ensures healthcare providers comply with federal non-discrimination laws when it comes to medically necessary care and promotes research and data collection on maternal health in America.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in Danielle Underwood of Kansans for Life. Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin with the right to keep, or the vote to keep the right to an abortion as part of the Kansas Constitution. What does this mean for the future of the pro-life fight in your state?
This is a very sad day for our state. Essentially, what's happening is that the nightmare scenario is indeed playing out ahead of us. And, you know, we knew going into this, we've been trying to warn Kansans for the last year and a half that we were going to see a dramatic increase in the number of abortions happening here if the value of the both amendment failed, which it did last night. And so what we're going to see now is this huge influx of women coming across our state borders to obtain abortions here in our state, and very likely that our state taxpayer dollars will soon be used to directly fund those abortions. And that's all what we've been predicting if the value of the both amendment did not pass. And so we're grieving today in our state, and also very angry just because of how things went down here, how much misinformation played a part in the defeat of the amendment, and how much the legacy media in our state played a part in that defeat.
And Danielle, as we saw earlier, 59% voted in favor of abortion protection yesterday. Is that number surprising to you? And do you feel abortion advocates are feeling emboldened after the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe?
We definitely saw a huge influx in the amount of energy and just an incredible increase in the amount of false information that was flooding into Kansas and then swirling around the state. So much was pulled into this discussion that never belonged in the true discussion of the facts of the amendment. You know, there was patently false information that was being spread everywhere, that somehow women who experienced miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy, other health conditions, were somehow going to be at risk. And that was never the case. And yet our legacy media here did not do their job. They did not share the facts of the amendment with the people of Kansas. And sadly, you know, we had this massive grassroots outreach effort that we've been doing for months and months and months, but it was not enough to overcome those incredible barriers that we had.
Mm-hmm. And Danielle, you said in the first part of this interview that you think that people seeking abortion are going to flood into Kansas. Today, the president signed an executive order protecting out-of-state travel for abortion. So do you think Kansas is going to become a safe haven for those who have to cross state lines? We have about 30 seconds left.
It absolutely is. That was the design of the abortion industry, was to force this abortion haven status on our state, to go through our state Supreme Court, to take the voice of the people completely out of the conversation about the right kind of limits. So many people were tricked into thinking that by voting against the amendment that they would still be able to keep the regulations we have in place, and we will not. And so that is indeed their plan, and that is what we will see.
Yeah, well, Danielle, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Kansans not the only people casting ballots last night, with the upcoming midterm election picture a little clearer following a number of primaries on Tuesday. Voters from Arizona, Michigan, Missouri, and Washington joined Kansas in casting their ballots. While former President Trump played a role, we're not sure of the full impact because some races remain undecided.
John Gibbs, and I'm running for Congress.
Newcomer John Gibbs defeated Michigan Republican incumbent Peter Meijer, one of 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, and becomes the second to lose a primary.
Thank you, Michigan.
The Trump impact was widespread. His pick for Michigan Governor Tudor Dixon will take on incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer. Former Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, plagued by multiple scandals, lost his Senate primary bid to the state's Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Prior to the voting, Trump released a statement endorsing Eric with no further information.
Arizona has sent a message.
But Trump may have had the biggest impact in Arizona. He backed GOP Senate candidate Blake Masters, who won his primary and will take on Democrat Mark Kelly in the fall. Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers lost his primary following his testimony before the January 6th committee, outlining how he resisted pressure to alter the outcome of the 2020 election.
Did anyone provide you with evidence of election fraud sufficient to affect the outcome of the presidential election in Arizona?
No one provided me ever such evidence.
Trump-backed Mark Finchem won the GOP primary for Arizona's Secretary of State's office after attending the January 6th rally and embracing decertifying the 2020 election. And in perhaps the country's most watched governor's race, the race remains too close to call. Trump endorsed former television news anchor Kari Lake, while his former Vice President Mike Pence backed businesswoman Karen Taylor Robeson. Both women felt confident while the votes were being tallied.
We have every right to celebrate tonight because when these votes are tallied, we will come out the victor. We will take back Arizona.
Keep calm, keep the faith, and keep us in your prayers. Because at the end of the day, we're going to win this thing. Thank you.
Here with us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We have a lot to unpack from these primary results. Now let's start with Arizona, where the race there is still too close to call, with Trump-backed Kari Lake holding on to a razor-thin lead there. Are you surprised by the results we've seen so far in Arizona?
Not particularly. I mean, Kari Lake had the advantage in the pre-election polling, so the fact that she's currently leading as votes are still being tabulated isn't a surprise. I think that if she indeed goes on to win the nomination, it makes things a little bit more complicated and maybe more difficult for Republicans to hold on to that governorship. Because Kari Lake has been very strident in some of her views, and goes farther than what maybe a majority of Arizonans might be. But it's going to be a competitive race. What I think is ironic about this race is that last night, Karen Taylor Robson, the other major candidate, was actually leading in votes that had been tabulated up to that point. But yet, as more election day votes were counted over last night, then Kari Lake pulled into the lead. And if that had been different, I think we would have been hearing some of the same stuff about the election being somehow illegitimate just because votes were counted while it's dark instead of when it's daylight.
And still a lot more votes to count there in Maricopa County. Well, Nathan, it seems like every primary is a litmus test over former President Trump's role in the Republican Party. Arizona is looking like it might go all in for Trump. Do you think that is an accurate picture of where the rest of the country is at?
Well, I think this is still Trump's Republican Party. I mean, he still has an influence where we're seeing around the country that his primary isn't the most important, isn't the only factor in a race, but it is important and can be influential, particularly if it's a crowded field. I don't think we've seen the same level. If Kari Lake wins the gubernatorial nomination, I don't know if we've seen in another state where sort of up and down all of the offices, we've seen a resounding victory or an entire slate of pro-Trump candidates win. But, Trump is still influential and is going to be a factor in these elections.
Mm-hmm. Now, Nathan, I want to ask you about Michigan. Tudor Dixon's win was a clear win for a Trump-backed candidate, even after what was an incredibly messy primary there. Can the pro-life Dixon defeat incumbent Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer come November?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, Joe Biden narrowly won Michigan in 2020, and we're seeing that independent voters have shifted away. Voters that went for Biden are now uncomfortable or dissatisfied with the direction of the country, the direction of the economy, and so that sets up a Republican well. I think Michigan is going to be a key place, though, to see, how focused are voters on the economy, the direction of the state, direction of the country, and how focused are they on abortion and access to abortion, and do they think that some Republicans are too extreme? This is where those Kansas results come into play, where a majority of voters aren't comfortable with abortion at all stages of a pregnancy, but majority of Americans are comfortable with some access in that first trimester. And so this will be a high-profile race.
And Nathan, quickly, let's finish with Missouri here, with the Senate seat there, where Eric Schmidt defeated the former governor over there, Eric Greitens. But hours before the primary, the former president endorsed just Eric, leaving off of a last name. Can Trump claim that as a win?
I mean, he can. It's just sort of silly, Matt. I mean, it's just, first of all, endorsing a candidate the day before the primary, I'm not sure how much influence that really has. And trying to have it both ways and sort of bet on two horses in a race, it's just, the former president's going to do what he's going to do. But this really didn't have an impact on this race. What had an impact was, with a few weeks left in the race, an outside group spent millions of dollars attacking former Governor Eric Greitens, and that pushed him from first place to third place, which is where he ended up finishing.
Well, Nathan, thank you so much. Here at Faith Nation, we're always going to endorse Nathan Gonzalez. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Chinese military exercises surround Taiwan. More of Beijing's response to Speaker Pelosi's visit when we come back.
America has unwavering support for Taiwan. That was the main message House Speaker Nancy Pelosi preached during her high-stakes visit to the country. But with her departure earlier today, tensions in the region are not dying down.
That's right. In response, China is now kicking off live ammunition military drills encircling the island. Brody Carter is following the mounting threat taking shape in the Taiwan Strait. Brody, Speaker Pelosi might be gone, but Taiwan's troubles could just be beginning.
Well, during her brief trip to Taiwan, Nancy Pelosi met with the island's president, saying the U.S. supports Taiwan's right to freedom and security. Since China believes Taiwan is an extension of itself, the PRC calls Pelosi's visit and support an act of grandstanding and dangerous provocation.
Whether it's certain insecurities on the part of the president of China as to his own political situation that he's rattling a saber, I don't know. What matters to us is that we salute the successes of Taiwan.
Following her departure this morning, China kicked off military drills that'll last the next 6 days. It's the longest such exercise in 30 years. This map shows China's planned positions will surround the entire island. The drills include live fire, which could get as close as 10 miles of Taiwan, potentially creating dangerous run-in situations with the island's air and nautical spaces.
Now, Brody, let's say China does make a move on Taiwan. What does that mean for the always delicate U.S.-China relations?
Well, Taiwan is designated as a major non-NATO ally. That means that we have strategic working relationships with their armed forces. Now, amid China's anger provoked by Pelosi's trip, the U.S. sent 4 warships and aircraft carrier to the eastern waters of Taiwan. One official maintains it's a normal routine deployment. Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institute says an attack on Taiwan would spell trouble for China.
Any kind of attack on Taiwan would cause a strong American reaction, whether military or not. We could never have the same relationship again. We would decouple economically and otherwise as much as we could, and there would be consequences that are sort of almost unimaginable at this point.
As for Nancy Pelosi's trip, she left Taiwan this morning and arrived in South Korea before heading to Tokyo. Matt and Abby, back to you.
Thank you so much. Well, coming up, the always faithful, how God is moving among Marines when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Honor, courage, and commitment. These are the core values of the United States Marines. And while many consider members of the Marine Corps to be some of the toughest around, many rely on faith in something much more powerful to make it through the military service.
Mark Martin traveled to a boot camp on Parris Island, South Carolina, to bring us this story of how God is on the move among young Marines.
It just feels super honorable to have that title, United States Marine.
CBN News caught up with Jacob Watson as he was about to graduate from boot camp. He's following in the footsteps of both his parents.
It's like something I will never forget or take for granted. Plus, some of the stuff that I've learned was like stuff I never thought I could do. So it was really a blessing to be able to conquer most of these things that I was afraid about at first, but thanks to the Marine Corps, I was able to do.
Watson points to his Christian faith for helping him stay the course.
Without a doubt, the only way I believe, at least I got through this, was faith in Christ. Because a bunch of this stuff, like I said, mentally was, kind of scary and intimidating. But, faith, I'll tell you what, it gets you a long ways.
It's the same story for others here at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island, South Carolina.
Throughout boot camp, reading my Bible and praying, it seemed to help me a lot.
And I remember thinking maybe I can't go through this. But I remember just thinking, well, if I have come this far, then God can definitely get me through the rest of it.
Through forming week, I was really just in my head, really, and I needed some help. We went to church, and I was praying to the Lord at night, and I was asking for some words of encouragement. And that next day, 3 songs back to back, just you're an overcomer. He's in a fight. You're in the fight to the final round. So I fought all the way throughout boot camp.
Here's the chapel at Parris Island Marine Corps Recruit Depot. There are 9 chaplains on duty at this installation, and one of their roles is to make sure that every person has the right to practice his or her faith and is free of discrimination.
I'm ensuring that that their First Amendment right is being constitutional right is being protected to exercise their religion.
Lieutenant Dawn Ashley is one of the 9.
I care for them, and that sometimes is through counseling, a lot of times through counseling here at Parris Island because it's boot camp and they're stressed a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. So we care for them pastorally also.
She said, I wrote this down when you said it, and I meditate on it. I pull it out when I'm having a hard time. I pull it out when things feel like they're really closing in on me, and it gives me a sense of hope. And so as a chaplain, that was one of those moments where I realized that the work that we do really does impact people. It really does kind of buoy their spirit and help them grow in their walk of faith.
Those who we get the honor of serving here, regardless of their faith,
we have found that spirituality plays an important part. And for those that are Christians, we've really seen how they have received breakthrough from all of their past challenges, breakthrough while they're here, and we see them really evolve to their higher level of self through Christ Jesus. And we're so honored that we get to love on them, to support them, and to walk alongside with them in this journey.
A lot of times they run away from the faith. They get here and they think they can do it on their own, and they quickly understand that they can't do it on their own. They need God. They need that connection with God. And so a lot of them come back to their faith while they're here.
Jesus means everything to me.
As a drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Evelyn Espinal must be tough as nails to train these recruits. Still, she faces difficult times and shared how the love and strength of God gets her through.
It was a very, very, very emotional time for me. I don't cry often, but when it comes to God and Jesus, I bawl my eyes out. And I needed that. I really needed that. I needed that strength to push through because I was struggling. It was my first years as a drill instructor. Those are the hardest years.
Captain Stephen Sigmund hopes how he lives his Christian faith will be seen and possibly inspire fellow Marines.
Definitely not perfect by any means. No one really is, and Christ did not expect that out of folks either. But to be able to, maybe one person at a time, have someone look at you and say, you know, they are different. There's something that's maybe different about them. And hopefully letting some form of Christ in me manifest itself to be able to have an example that maybe I'm making an impact on one person in each unit that I go to.
Allowing his faith to make an impact, an action Sigmund describes as fulfilling God's calling to be the change or light in the world. Mark Martin, CBN News, Parris Island, South Carolina.
Well, coming up, an unexpected reunion and a thankful family. The details next.
Finally tonight, 5 years after their dog was stolen from their front yard, a Texas family got the surprise of a lifetime.
I love this story. Their German Shepherd, Sheba, was found alive and well 600 miles from home. An animal control officer came across Sheba wandering around, and no one knows how the dog ended up so far away. But Sheba's microchip was able to point the officer in the direction of her family. He contacted them with pictures and set up a video call. Oh, look at that. The family is now working to bring their dog home. Could you imagine if Samson was 600 miles away?
I can't. This is amazing. I love this story so much.
Yeah, I like, my dogs love going for walks, and we joke, like, you know, if I let Theo out, he would go. He would just go. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.